Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into Acts 17 today.
Oh, okay.
Verses 1 through 34 to be exact. We're following Paul and Silas on their journey as they spread the word.
I see.
We're going to be tracing their travels and the people they encountered along the way.
Right.
And looking at all the different reactions they got, really getting a glimpse into what it was like to do this early Christian missionary work.
Yeah, this section is really fascinating. It highlights all these complexities of bringing this new belief system, right, into a world that's already full of so many different philosophies and religious practices.
Yeah, it's almost like they're walking into this totally new territory, and they're running into all these different cultures and different ways of thinking. So let's start with their arrival in Thessalonica.
Right.
Now, we know Paul had a very specific way of approaching these new communities.
That's right.
What was it?
Well, he would often start by going to the synagogues, which, were really the centers of Jewish life in all these cities.
Right.
So in Thessalonica, he spends 3 Sabbaths, reasoning with people there. And he's using their own scriptures, right, to explain how Jesus was the promised Messiah.
Okay, so that seems like a really smart move.
Yeah.
He's starting from this familiar ground.
Exactly.
And building up his argument from there.
Mm-hmm.
But I can imagine that not everybody was on board with this.
No, you're absolutely right.
Interpretation.
You're right. The text tells us there were all sorts of different reactions.
Okay.
Some Jews were convinced by what he said, and then a number of devout Greeks and even some prominent women, they all started to believe.
Interesting.
But yeah, this new message also caused some pushback. And it wasn't just from the people who might see it as a threat to their own beliefs.
I see. So what did this pushback look like?
Well, some people, maybe they were jealous or maybe they were scared of the change this new movement represented. But they started stirring up trouble.
Oh, no.
And they accused Paul and Silas of going against Caesar.
Oh.
And that was really serious back then, especially in Roman-occupied territories.
Right. So it wasn't just about religion.
No.
It became this whole political issue. I remember reading about how Jason's house was attacked.
Uh-huh. That's a really important detail. It shows just how quickly things could escalate. We have to remember the idea of anyone claiming authority that could even come close to Rome's was like a direct threat to the emperor's power and to the whole social order.
Right.
So when Paul was saying Jesus was another king, he was stepping onto some really dangerous ground.
So this whole king concept was really at the heart of the issue for the Romans.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense why they reacted so strongly. I bet it must have been so chaotic in Thessalonica.
Oh, yeah.
With the city all riled up and these accusations being thrown around in front of the city rulers.
It's like a scene straight out of a movie.
It really does.
It's crazy. This whole episode shows us the risks that Paul and Silas were willing to take to spread their message,
Yeah.
They were facing all these challenges, and eventually they had to leave Thessalonica.
Right.
And they ended up in Berea.
And in Berea, they get a totally different reception.
You're telling me.
The Bereans are described as more noble-minded.
Yeah.
And it's not because they just blindly believe Paul.
Exactly.
Because they really thought about his message.
They were so engaged.
They listened to him.
Yes.
But then they took it a step further.
They did.
They looked at the scriptures themselves.
That's real.
See if his arguments actually held up.
That's what makes them so noble.
They were critical thinkers.
Absolutely.
They weren't just sitting there listening.
Yeah.
They weren't afraid to question Paul's interpretations and test them against their own understanding of the scriptures.
Such a refreshing approach.
Totally. It's like a breath of fresh air.
It is.
After all the drama in Thessalonica.
It is.
A place where they could actually have a real conversation and share their ideas in a place that was a bit more receptive.
Yeah, exactly.
But did they run into similar issues there?
Unfortunately, yes. The text says that trouble followed them from Thessalonica,
Oh, no.
And Paul had to move on again, this time leaving Silas and Timothy behind.
Okay.
He headed to Athens.
Athens.
Yeah, the intellectual heart of Greece.
Wow.
This city that was just known for its philosophers and all its idols.
Wow. So from this really open-minded community in Berea, he goes straight into this, what you might call a lion's den.
That's right.
Of intellectual discourse in Athens.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how he approaches this new audience.
Me too.
Especially since they're known for being so logical and reasonable.
Athens was a melting pot of ideas.
Yeah.
It was home to the legacy of Socrates and Plato, Aristotle, you name it.
Right.
This was a city where open debate
Wow.
and challenging established norms were just part of daily life.
That's wild. So how did Paul, with his very radical message about Jesus, navigate all this?
Right.
We know he was a skilled communicator.
He was.
He would adapt his approach to different audiences.
Mm-hmm.
So how did he connect with the people of Athens?
Well, he started, like he often did, by engaging with people in the marketplace, which was like this hub of activity with all sorts of different perspectives.
Right.
He would debate with the Jews there and with other devout individuals.
Right.
And most interestingly, with the philosophers.
No, I am really fascinated
I know, right?
by those philosophical encounters. I remember reading about the Epicureans and the Stoics.
Yes.
They were like the two main schools of thought in Athens at the time.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure.
And maybe how their philosophies might have clashed with Paul's message.
Okay, so in a nutshell,
Okay.
the Epicureans believed that the best thing in life was pleasure.
Okay.
And the absence of pain.
All right.
They were all about living in the present moment,
Oh,
finding enjoyment in those simple pleasures of life.
that's interesting, but how does that fit with Paul's message of self-denial and focusing on the afterlife?
Exactly. They seem to be on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Totally.
Right. And then you had the Stoics, who were all about virtue and reason and living in harmony with nature.
Right.
They believed in accepting what you can't control and just focusing on living a virtuous life.
Now, that sounds a little more aligned with
Right.
some of Paul's teachings, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
Were there still points of disagreement
Oh, absolutely.
between their philosophies and Paul's message?
For example, the Stoics believed in fate
Okay.
and this predetermined order to the universe. Right.
While Paul was all about free will
I see.
and the possibility of personal transformation through faith in Jesus.
So even with the Stoics, who might seem a little more compatible on the surface, there were still these fundamental differences in how they saw the world.
Big time.
I could see how talking to these philosophers would be
Oh, yeah.
really challenging, but also really intellectually stimulating for Paul.
It was like stepping onto a battleground of ideas.
Totally. And that leads us to one of the most dramatic scenes in this chapter.
Tell me more.
Paul standing before the Areopagus.
Oh, wow.
It was this prominent council known for its philosophical debates.
Okay.
Basically, the intellectual heart of Athens.
Wow.
Where all the most important issues were discussed.
I see.
Decisions were made.
So it's not just casual marketplace conversation anymore.
No, he's standing before the intellectual elite of Athens.
Wow.
Getting ready to present his radical new message about Jesus.
I can't wait to hear what happens next. I know. I'm on the edge of my seat wondering how he's going to approach this formidable audience.
Right. It's a huge moment in his journey, and it shows how adaptable he was and how well he understood how to tailor his message for different people.
Yeah.
Remember, this is the same guy who was accused of turning the world upside down.
Right.
And now he's standing before the people who literally shaped the way the world thought.
It's incredible.
What a scene.
Yeah, it really is.
Just imagine yourself, in Paul's shoes, standing before this council, having to introduce Jesus to this audience who's so deeply rooted in their own traditions.
Yeah, it's almost like David and Goliath.
It is.
This lone preacher versus the intellectual giant of Athens.
Yeah.
How does he bridge that gap? What strategy does he use to connect with this really discerning audience?
Instead of just diving into this big theological discussion, he starts by acknowledging their existing beliefs. He even compliments them on their religiosity.
Okay, so he's being very strategic in his approach.
He is.
He doesn't want to alienate them right away.
Right.
So what does he say?
Well, he uses this inscription he saw on an altar dedicated to the unknown God.
I see. So he's acknowledging that they already have this concept of a God that they don't know.
That's right. He's not dismissing their beliefs.
Right.
He's kind of suggesting that maybe they're searching for something more, something that they haven't grasped yet.
That's a good point.
Yeah. It's almost like he's saying, hey, you already believe in an unknown God.
Okay.
Let me introduce you to him.
That's really smart. That's a really subtle but powerful way to connect with them, right?
Absolutely.
To pique their interest. So how does he go from there?
Well,
does he just jump right into the specifics of Jesus and the resurrection?
Not quite. He starts by laying a foundation, talking about God as the creator of everything.
Okay.
And emphasizing that God isn't confined to temples or idols.
Okay, so how does that go over?
Well, this really resonated with the Stoic idea of a universal logos, this divine reason that's in all of creation.
Right, so he's still kind of weaving in these elements.
Yeah, he's really smart about it. He respects their beliefs, but he's also introducing new concepts.
Yeah, it's a very delicate balancing act.
It is.
It's impressive. So were there any parts of his speech that directly challenged?
Yeah, there were a couple.
Athenian thought.
He brings up repentance and this idea of a coming judgment, which were pretty alien to Greek thinking.
Okay, so those ideas wouldn't have been
No, they wouldn't have.
familiar to them?
The Epicureans, for example, didn't believe in an afterlife or divine retribution. And even the Stoics, they had a very different understanding of judgment.
Okay, so it wasn't all just smooth sailing.
Not at all.
He did eventually bring in these elements that directly contradict their established beliefs.
Right, and that created some tension, you know?
How do they react?
Well, the text says it was kind of a mixed bag, just like in Thessalonica.
Oh, okay.
Some mocked him.
No.
They thought his ideas were foolish or even dangerous. You have to remember, the idea of a bodily resurrection was crazy to the Greeks.
So they just completely rejected his message.
Some did.
Okay.
They thought it was absurd or even a threat.
And were there any who were more
There were.
open to what Paul had to say?
Some were intrigued. And they wanted to hear more.
Okay, so that's good. At least they're open to hearing more.
They might not have been fully convinced.
Okay.
But they were open to more dialogue.
That's a good starting point.
Yeah, it shows that Paul had planted this little seed of curiosity in some of their minds.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember.
It is.
That change doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't overnight.
Especially when you're dealing with beliefs that are so deeply ingrained.
Yeah, sometimes it's about planting seeds of doubt, getting people to question,
That's right.
to explore further. And those are victories in and of themselves.
They are.
And of course, some people went
They did.
beyond just curiosity.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, the text specifically mentions Dionysius, the Areopagite, who was actually a member of the council.
Wow, interesting.
And a woman named Damaris.
Okay.
They both came to believe.
So despite all the skepticism
Yes.
and even ridicule, Paul managed to reach a few people.
He did.
Even in this intellectual...
Yeah, the intellectual heartland of Greece.
Cinder of Greece.
It's really remarkable.
It's a real testament, I think, to the power of his message.
His communication skills, and I think most importantly...
What's that?
Just his unwavering conviction.
Absolutely. I think his experience in Athens really shows us just how complex it is to communicate new ideas.
Right.
It's this process that's full of challenges, setbacks,
of course,
but also these moments of genuine connection.
Yeah.
And these unexpected breakthroughs.
And it's a process that requires a lot of adaptability.
Right.
A lot of empathy.
Yeah.
And a willingness to meet people where they are.
Yeah, or where they are.
Yeah, we've seen Paul tailor his approach in every city he goes to.
He's so good at it.
From the synagogues in Thessalonica to the marketplace discussions and this very formal address at the Areopagus.
It's a masterclass in communication.
It really is.
It really is.
It's about finding that common ground.
That's right.
Respecting those differences.
Yeah.
And presenting your ideas in a way that makes sense to your audience.
That's right.
And I think there are a lot of lessons there.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just for people who are interested in religious history.
No.
But for anybody who wants to connect with others. And share their ideas in a meaningful way.
In a meaningful way.
And speaking of challenges.
Okay.
What I find interesting is that even after this somewhat successful encounter in Athens, things don't seem to get any easier for Paul.
You're right.
What happens next?
Well, the text doesn't really go into too much detail about Paul's time in Athens.
Okay.
It quickly moves on to his departure for Corinth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we don't really know why he left.
Okay.
Or what kind of immediate impact his speech had.
Interesting.
Some scholars think he may have been discouraged by the mixed reactions.
I see.
Or maybe he felt like he needed to move on to new places.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been really tough.
I know.
To face opposition and skepticism all the time.
All the time. And even though he had some success in Athens, it's not like the whole city suddenly converted to Christianity.
Yeah, it's a process.
It's a process.
And change takes time.
Oh, it does.
But this really highlights, I think, another important aspect of Paul's journey.
Yeah, what is it?
And that is his resilience.
His resilience. Tell me more.
He faced setbacks.
Yes.
He faced rejection. Even threats to his life.
Wow.
But he never gave up.
He never gave up on his mission.
He understood that spreading the word was a long game.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It was about planting these seeds.
That's right.
And nurturing them.
Yeah.
Even when he didn't know what the results would be.
Even when it was uncertain.
So it's not just about being a good speaker or having...
Right. It's more than that.
Clever arguments. It's about perseverance.
Yeah.
It's about really believing in what you're saying.
Yeah, and holding on to your convictions.
Even when things get tough.
Even when things get tough.
And I think that's a quality we can all admire.
Absolutely.
And strive for.
It's so important.
No matter what we believe.
No matter what.
Or what challenges we face.
No matter what we face in our own lives.
That ability to pick yourself up after a setback.
Yeah.
To learn from your mistakes.
Yes.
And just keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward.
With determination.
Yeah.
Those are qualities that really cut through time and culture.
They transcend everything.
Yeah, it's a reminder that success isn't always a straight line.
Yeah.
There are going to be obstacles, detours, moments of doubt.
Yeah.
But what matters is how we respond to those challenges.
That's right.
And whether we can ultimately find meaning and purpose in the journey itself.
Beautifully said.
And as we continue to explore Paul's journey, it's good to keep this in mind.
Absolutely.
His experiences offer us valuable lessons.
They do.
Not just about early Christianity, but about what it means to be human.
Yeah.
The challenges we all face, the choices we make, and that enduring power of faith and resilience, and the search for truth.
So well said.
You know, it's amazing to think that despite all the hardships, and the pushback he faced. Paul's journey was ultimately a story of remarkable success.
It really is.
I mean, his message spread far and wide.
It did.
It left a real mark on history.
It's interesting, though.
What is it?
His impact wasn't just because he was so smart.
Okay.
Or because he was such a good speaker. There was something more, something about him that people connected with.
I think it was his authenticity.
His authenticity.
He wasn't just like reciting doctrines or giving these perfectly crafted arguments. He was sharing something that had truly changed his life.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
He was like a living example of how powerful his beliefs were.
Yeah.
People could feel his conviction, his passion.
Right.
And that made a huge difference.
Think about his past.
Okay.
He went from being someone who persecuted Christians to being one of their strongest advocates.
That's quite a story.
That's a really powerful story.
Absolutely. Gave him this credibility.
Right.
That's just arguments couldn't match.
Right.
It made his message more human, more relatable.
Right. It reminds us that sometimes the most persuasive arguments don't just come from logic or reason. They come from the heart. From real-life experiences.
That's right.
Sharing our own stories, our struggles, the times when we doubted and how we change. Those are powerful ways to connect with other people.
It's about being vulnerable, letting people see your human side, especially in a world that feels so cynical and distrustful.
Okay, so Paul's journey wasn't just about persuasion. It was also about this personal transformation and authenticity.
Absolutely.
And let's not forget his adaptability.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he didn't have this one-size-fits-all message.
No, he tailored his approach to every single audience.
He understood their culture.
Yeah.
And he brought in things they were familiar with.
He was smart about it.
But he still challenged their core beliefs.
Yeah, he didn't shy away from that.
So it's not just about being a good speaker or having charisma.
It's more than that.
It's about really understanding your audience, meeting them where they are, and finding those deeper connections.
Absolutely. It's about building bridges.
Yeah, not walls.
Yeah, and that's something we can all learn from.
It is.
No matter what we're talking about.
Yeah, religion, politics.
Every day.
It's about recognizing that we can be passionate without being dogmatic.
That's right.
We can learn from people who disagree with us.
Absolutely.
And maybe even find common ground.
Yeah.
In surprising places.
I agree.
Paul's journey encourages us.
It does.
To be open to new ideas.
Okay.
To have those respectful conversations.
Yeah.
And to really embrace
the
diversity of human thought and experience.
It's a beautiful thing.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Acts 17,
okay,
what do you think is the most significant takeaway?
For me, it's the reminder that even in a world that feels so divided, connection and understanding are still possible. I mean, Paul, with his radical message, went through faced so much opposition.
He did.
But he still managed to plant these seeds of change that turned into a global movement.
It's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of ideas.
It is.
And the resilience of the human spirit. And it shows that we can find common ground.
Yeah.
Even when we have our differences.
Even when it seems impossible.
And maybe that's the most important lesson from Paul's journey.
I think so.
It encourages us to engage with the world.
Yeah.
To share our beliefs with courage and compassion.
That's right.
And to never underestimate the power of human connection.
I agree.
And the potential for change.
Absolutely.
Well said. Thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
On this deep dive into Acts 17.
It was fascinating.
It's been a journey full of insights.
It has.
Challenges.
Yeah.
And ultimately a reminder of how powerful the human spirit really is.
I agree.
To connect. To communicate. And to create lasting change.
I couldn't have said it better myself.